and people on Zoom. The workshop tonight is the first of maybe 3 workshops. We'll see how it goes on the proposed amendments to the solar regulations for the town of Farmington. The current moratorium that's in place on large-scale solar systems is scheduled to end on February 10th, 2022, or sooner, depending upon the town board's adoption of a local law, such as the one we're considering here tonight. The members of the committee that are here in the room are Jody Bennix, who is from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we have Kim Boyd from the Conservation Board. We have our zoning inspector, John Weidenborner. We also have Lance Brigant from the Town Engineers MRD Group. And online, I believe, is
2 people online.
2 people, but the other committee member hasn't joined us yet, Nate Bowerman. He's running a little late, but he said he would hop on as soon as he could. So continuing, the format of tonight, the workshop is to kind of have an overview of the draft regulations, answer questions of the committee, and then turn it open to the public for them to ask questions about what we're doing. Local law that we're reviewing tonight would amend Chapter 165, Articles 4, 5, 6, 8, and 8 of the town code. But let's do a little background about how we are here tonight. First, probably most in everybody's mind is the major findings from the court decision on the Delaware River Solar Project did not identify any alleged errors in the current solar regulations, nor did they identify any omissions in the proceedings by the planning board, which were based on those existing regulations. So with that, the town is relieved to know that the regulations that we do have in place are okay. The answer, though, that we are why we are here is more of the past 3 years, which began with the adoption of local law number 6 of 2017, and since then, the introduction of the solar application by Delaware River in August of 2018, which resulted in the final approvals being granted by the planning board on May 5th of 2021. But during that 2-year period plus time, there were a number of public requests made at the various public hearings to take into consideration some amendments to the solar regs. And here are some of those requests. There are those that wanted to see the new solar regulations, which it was asserted weren't adequately provided to the public for input. And the town's response is that the draft local law before us tonight has been posted on the town's website beginning on November 1st of this year. And the need for the amendment has been identified in numerous town operation reports over the past months, and will remain, and the draft local law will remain on the town's website and continue to be reported upon in the town operation reports every 2 weeks when the town board meets. These regulations may be modified. I can tell you I have some changes tonight that I want to see to these regulations, and we'll get into that discussion in a little bit. And they'll remain there until the new local law is scheduled for a public hearing by the town board. And that probably will be sometime in either December or January, depending on where we are at that point in time. There were others who wanted more protection provided of the valuable farmland soils, and they wanted that added to the town's solar regulations. In this draft legislation you have before you tonight, we have introduced proposed regulations requiring the creation of an agricultural conservation easement, or ACE as it's referred to in the New York State Ag and Agricultural Districts Law. ACEs would be required on land nearby a proposed solar farm site that is located in an established Ontario County Agricultural Use District, which is Consolidated District Number 1. And the ACE would be agreed to between the property owner and the solar farm applicant. And it would be based on one or more parcels of land, depending on the acreage involved with the application. The strategic farmland parcels are now shown on the screen. This map is part of the adopted Town of Farmington Farmland Protection Plan. The intent of the regulations we're looking at tonight is for example, if there is a 30-year solar farm, which is what we've been told is the standard length of time for large-scale ground-mounted solar systems, involving 60 acres of land, then and that land is located on one of those strategic farmland parcels, then the solar company, as part of its requirements, would have to have a ACE or agricultural conservation easement in effect on the equal amount of acreage being developed for the solar farm. And it would have to remain in effect with the property owner for the period of time that the solar farm continues to operate. What this does is it provides an additional incentive to landowners to keep their land in production while an equal amount of land has been temporarily taken out of production for the solar farms to operate. The near property owner gains income from the solar company on an annual basis, and it doesn't affect his ag exemptions because the land is continuing to be used for agricultural purposes. Others wanted to restrict solar farms to lands that were already zoned commercial or industrial. I did research on this, I checked with organizations such as the New York Planning Federation, and we find that there is no legal basis a municipality can enact to restrict such a prohibition on land, simply put, because the sun shines everywhere. Maybe not as often as we'd like it to, but it does. And to otherwise do so could be argued as being arbitrary and either capricious and or both, and in doing so could expose the town to future litigation. Other suggestions are involved that the town itself would be best suited if it were to identify where solar farms could be, regardless of what the zoning was. This idea has been studied by a number of municipalities, and I participated in one of the New York Planning Federation webinars on this. And to date, however, they are not aware of any municipality that has enacted such.
Hey, Ron?
Yeah. Who's this?
We have Nate just buzzed in.
Okay. Want to mute yourself there, Nate? please.
Hi,
Sure.
sorry, I can't hear you too well. This is Nate Bowerman, Farmington Town Board.
Is anybody else having difficulty hearing me? Not hearing
Yes,
me.
we're having a difficult time hearing you too, Ron. Jim and Nancy Falanga.
Is this on? Is this any better?
A little bit, I guess.
Hold on, he's giving me a microphone. Yeah, this one's better. Okay, how's this? Is this better?
Probably not. Testing.
I can't turn my volume up. No.
This one, the batteries.
That was shut off too. They went fast batteries.
I usually have a little icon down here where I can turn up the volume, but I don't see it.
Let's try this. Is it any better? Can you hear me?
I know that you're like quoting about one of the mics from the board members, if you tilt it towards you, would that pick you up?
Or I can sit up. We're gonna do that. Speaking of the mic, speaking.
Testing, can you hear me?
Yeah, that comes.
That mic up there. Still on.
Okay, let's try this. Is this better? Does this work any better?
Can you guys hear them any better right now?
A little bit better, Ron, but it's still a little, sounds a little mumbly still.
Well, I'll try not to mumble. Can't promise anything, Jim.
Okay.
Apparently we're working with it. So it was brought to our attention during the course of preparing the various resolutions on our first solar farm application that there were some things in the town code that were perhaps a little bit out of line. In particular, some of the special use provisions, which are all within Article 6 of the town code, hadn't been placed in Article 6, they'd been left in the other article of the code. And for the most part, that's the major part of what we're dealing with here tonight. But a little history on the town's solar regulations. We first started getting inquiries from town residents in early 2016. And from that point on, town residents were being approached by solar companies seeking interest in placing solar farms on their land. And I might stop here and just say that that interest is still out there today. There's still a number of people calling, wanting to know when the moratorium is going to be lifted on solar farms, large-scale solar operations. But at the time, back in 2016, the town had no solar regulations. And on November 22nd, adopted Local Law 5 of 2016, entitled Establishing a Moratorium on Solar Collection Systems and Solar Farms. This law became in effect with the filing of the Secretary of State for 6 months. During this time, the solar committee, the original solar committee, learning what was other municipalities were doing, with creating solar regulations. What NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Agency, was promoting as a model law, and what Ag Markets was promoting for protection of prime and unique classified agricultural soils, and restoration of areas disturbed for solar farm construction on an ongoing operation. I can report that there has been a wide array of legislation across the state. Some are quite detailed, others not so much. On July 25th, 2017, the town board adopted local law 3 of 2017, again a moratorium extending the moratorium on solar farms through December 1st of 2017. On September 26, 2017, the town board adopted local law number 6 of 2017, entitled Solar Photovoltaic PV System Regulations. And these are the regulations that remain in effect today, although there is a moratorium that prohibits the town from accepting new applications. Again, just to remind everybody that current moratorium is scheduled to end on February 10th, 2022. The solar committees appointed back in 2017, the members first met on August 15th, and there were a total of 8 people who represented various town boards, town advisory committees, and town staff. The present committee consists of many of the original solar committee membership. Now, some of the highlights of the local law that we're looking at here tonight. First, the draft legislation does not contain any new terms for which there would need to be an amendment to the Article 2 of Chapter 165 terminology. The intent of the draft legislation is now written in the law to meet the goals and objectives of renewable energy contained in the latest edition of the Town Comprehensive Plan, to support federal and state programs for sustaining renewable energy sources while protecting valuable non-renewable agricultural soils and farming operations, and to foster agricultural reliability and protect agricultural land resources here in the town. The intent also is to support federal and state green energy innovations and initiatives, to support the 2015 New York State Energy Plan is being implemented through the Reforming the Energy Vision Institute, and to support New York State climate leadership and Community Protection Act, which became effective January 1st of 2020. Major renewable energy or electrical solar PV systems that are exempt under these regulations are listed on page 6 of 30. Those regulations are for the larger 25 megawatt operating systems. Standards for large-scale PV systems requiring a special use permit. These are now listed in Article 6, Section 185 of the Farmington Town Code. In that section, there are 10 subsections which contain the criteria that pertain to any large-scale application for a large-scale ground-mounted solar PV system. And that's on pages 7 through 25. Finally, Chapter 165, Article 8, Administration and Enforcement, has been amended in its entirety to clarify that the Planning Board is empowered to, in accordance with the provisions of 274A and 274B of the New York State Town Law, to issue special use permits and site plan approvals. This is on page 25 through 30. So we'll get into a discussion here in a minute on the details of this draft. But the next steps is to consider the amendment before you tonight, and if appropriate, any other amendments that we hear will be added with a new date of amendment. The current date is November 1st, and there will be at least one amendment that I'm going to talk about here in a moment. And that's the section 99. We're going to have to add the Main Street overlay district. And we have the major thoroughfare overlay district reference. So we need to reference the Main Street overlay district. Depending on the nature of the proposed amendments, the committee will either decide to reconvene or vote to recommend submission of the amended draft local law to the town board for its consideration and process. The the town board may schedule a public hearing once they're satisfied with what they receive. And it's at that time that the town clerk will sign a tentative number. Now, the tentative number, because of the time of year that we're in, going into January, December, sometimes at the end of the year, when a municipality files a local law with the Secretary of State, we find out a few weeks later that instead of it being a local law of 2021, it was not accepted and filed by the Secretary of State. So therefore, it has to be a new number in 2022. But that's the efficiency of state government working for us. Once the town board receives the draft local law, there'll be a referral to the county planning board for their advisory review under the general municipal law. The county planning board meets only on a monthly basis. They meet on December 8th, and then they'll meet again on January 12th. And depending on when the local law is submitted, the public hearing will be scheduled for Tuesday, December 21st, or Tuesday, January 25th. The town board has to consider the county's recommendation prior to taking action. And before I open the floor to the members of the committee here in the room, Al Adams, the chairman of the town's Ag Advisory Committee, unfortunately isn't here with us tonight, but he did submit comments that he would like entered into the meeting record. First, he says he doesn't have I detect no opposition to small-scale solar projects, particularly building integrated installations from residents. We have seen significant resistance to the first large-scale grid-connected solar project proposal in the town, recognizing that Farmington cannot prohibit legal uses of land by private property owners, and further recognizing that both our state and federal governments are promoting renewable energy projects through many means. I believe there is still some discretion on the part of the town regarding our stance towards the siting of utility scale solar installation in rural areas of Farmington. The provisions in the wording of this town law can range from accommodating to restrictive. I believe it appropriate for town board members who will ultimately approve the new code to express their opinions to this committee early in the rewrite process, so that the finished document has broad support before the end of the current moratorium. Now, some of the questions that he asked relate to section 2 of the local law. Go to here, which is the article on the solar PV systems. And this first question is number 2B, one that talks about meet the goals of the town comprehensive plan of the protect the goal is to protect, enhance continued agricultural operations, protect viable agricultural land resources, and provide public utility facilities and energy services that are efficiently meeting the present needs and anticipated future needs of residents in accordance with the goals and objectives of the plan. And it says that he believes the town does not provide energy services. Well, I don't read this to mean that they do. It's just the goal statement that this is what they want to protect. Second comment, 2D, he feels there that the New York State building codes are quite enough. We don't need to worry about the international codes in this process. And I'll leave that interpretation up to John and Dan as they work with that on a daily basis. But the one thing that we did add under D was clarification that all building mounted or building integrated by right systems shall be considered as accessory uses and shall require a building permit. Excuse me. Moving on. Al skips to page 8, where he talks about normal agricultural soil testing assesses nutrient levels, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, micronutrients, organic matter, etc. And if you are looking for soil contamination, you might want to specify that. That's a point, and we'll take that into consideration. Next on page 10, the issue on large scale ground mounted systems protecting strategic farmland. And his question is, will this provision withstand a legal challenge? Well, that remains to be seen, of course. Anyone can bring a legal action against the town. But I have consulted with our special legal counsel on this. I've also talked to Dr. Bob King at Monroe Community College, who's the head of the Ag Life Science Department up there. Excuse me. And I've talked with representatives of the New York Planning Federation, all of whom are intrigued by this approach to wanting to protect farmland resources. On page 13, Al talks about the depth 48 inches right now. The depth of 48 inches is what Ag and Markets had put in there. That's usually the depth down below the cross line, so that they can put foundations down there to support large scale solar panels. So that's the answer to that question. On page 14, Al, number 21, was not sure what this is referring to. Any digging will alters stratification of soil varieties. And basically, it's talking about Ontario County Soil and Water Conservation District being consulted concerning the type of intercept drains whenever buried electric cable alters the natural stratification. So their report has to be taken into consideration. And then number 8, page 18. Now, yes, I wonder how feasible it is to determine what happens 20 years out. Who or what mechanism determines the surety of the ultimate recourse will always be the landowner? Well, yes and no. The ultimate recourse with the decommissioning plan that we have put in place rests with the operators of the system. They have to post the maintenance bond for the life of the solar farm operation. And that maintenance bond is reviewed every 3 years as part of the review by the town on the operations to identify that it's still a viable solar farm and it's operating to the standards that is approved for. So with that, he just basically thanks the committee and doesn't have any other comments. Now, other committee members. I'm going to turn to those first in the audience, in the room here. Any member of the committee have things they want to add? John, you want to start? You're good?
I'm good.
Okay, Kimberly.
I think I did have a question about ensuring long-term maintenance.
Yes.
So will there be a standard maintenance agreement that the town drafts that gives you give?
We were required to develop a decommissioning plan, which specifies the maintenance agreement and the closeout of the property. Correct?
We required the applicant to submit an operation and maintenance plan that governs the site, and then a decommissioning plan that is basically our agreement with them to decommission the site. Those two reports get provided, and both of them are part of the special use permit and site plan application process. Currently.
And then they'll be tied with the ownership of the property, and when the property transfers, those people are aware of the requirements.
Correct. So
They're aware of what they're inheriting.
Yeah, basically, I just go back to stormwater maintenance plans, as we all know, those were also regulated like many years ago. But they're only certain homes and people are,
how are they aware?
yeah, how are they aware?
Are they aware?
And the getting this, so basically,
Right.
we want to make sure that something this size wouldn't get this, because this is gonna cost a lot more than cleaning out.
Right, so currently the town requires the landowner to provide some notice to the town that they understand and accept the responsibility. And then the plan themselves gets signed by all parties, the owner, the applicant, and the town, as an understanding of the agreement that they're being required to. One of the items that we looked into was a filing of the agreement with the county, so that it's placed on the property, on the deed, so that when it gets transferred over, there's some record that there's something else that governs the site.
Yeah, in this particular first instance that we had, there were 3 separate parties, limited liability corporations, which had to sign on to the maintenance agreement and the decommissioning plan. And the property owner, in this instance, there were 2 people listed on the tax rolls, so they both had to sign on to it, as well as the town supervisor on behalf of the town. So it's something took a lot of time to develop. We did a lot of rewrite from what we got, and finally reached a consensus with all the parties involved. Other questions?
And then someone from the town will be tracking that on an annual basis.
Yeah.
To make sure they get those reports involved.
Right, the code officer, does a annual inspection, and then every 3 years he gets involved with the operation reports.
Right, and operation and maintenance reports typically identify all the reports that get generated from the on-site inspections that get done by the applicant or the solar project over the course. And so all of the people involved with that process, including the town, get notified all those reports. So they replace a tree, that report gets generated, gets forwarded to the code enforcement officer. Because, well, this is still a special use permit, so if something is not in accordance with that plan, technically the special use permit could be pulled and they could be forced to come back to the boards to deal with that. So all reports generated from on-site inspections during construction and then ultimately after it's in operation get forwarded to the town.
Thank you.
Okay, I think on you next, Jody.
Um,
You're new to this. so-
I am new to this, so I've never reviewed a local law before. So I don't know, maybe my question is, maybe my answer to my question is in here. I read it through once, but it's a lot of information.
Thank you.
For the surety, that's my understanding, that's like the money that's gonna go to help decommission the decommission plan to execute that.
Right,
Is that reviewed every 3 years according to this? And then does it change based on like inflation? Because I'm assuming,
yes.
okay. This is not gonna, when you build it, it's gonna cost a lot more when you take it out. I mean.
Currently, in the law, there's two forms of surety. One is a letter of credit, which is filed with the town clerk,
Okay,
and it is available during construction of the site.
okay,
So in the event one of the solar companies says, I've had it, I'm out of here, it's all yours, go for it. We have funds to reclaim that portion of the site.
okay, so that's always been.
Then during the course of the life of the solar operation, every 3 years, it's the maintenance bond, which is a separate form of surety, is reviewed to determine what effect inflation may have and on the amount in there, or what items have been added or deleted that needs to be added to the maintenance funds. So in other words, if they put something different on the site than what they originally shown on the original site.
Yeah, the maintenance bond is basically part of the decommissioning plan, and that runs forever.
Okay,
And only gets used if and when the site is either abandoned or the special use permit gets pulled or everything needs to be reclaimed on the site. The letter of credit that Ron alluded to, that's usually just during construction. Once construction ends, that goes back, that gets released back to the applicant that posted the letter of credit. I have one question, Ron.
Yeah,
Reading through this, the term surety is the only thing that I see in there. It doesn't specify maintenance bond, if that's what we're calling it, or decommissioning surety. I don't know if that's something that the committee wants to look into or not, but we might want to specify, because there is two versions of it, as you
Right.
said. So in the document, it references surety a lot, and so I'm thinking it might make sense to identify it as the decommissioning maintenance surety, if that's what we're asking for, or when the appropriate time, the letter of credit as we suggested.
okay.
Only just because I see surety and I'm not sure which one
Yeah.
is recorded to what.
One of the other things that this local law does is that there have been instances where the courts have held that a municipality, once it's issued a special use permit, the special use permit runs with the land. And there have been recent court decisions where the courts have held that if the municipality specifies that the planning board has the right to revoke a special use permit upon action by the planning board and after notice is inherent, that means that if they are in default for any reason with the conditions of the special use permit, the planning board has the right to bring action to terminate that special use permit, but it has to be after notice and hearing. So that's a provision that our legal counsel advised us on, and we've added to this. So that's something that will apply not just to solar, to apply to any special permitted use that is listed out there. So some of the other changes that we've added here, you'll see highlighted For example, locations of sidewalk, bike lanes, and trail. It doesn't really relate to solar, but it does relate to other actions in other sections of the code that we're modifying the powers and duties and authority of the planning board as well as site plan approval. So those conditions have been added there. And one of the things that we clarified, because we thought it was important, that, rather than just referencing that the planning board was authorized the power under 274 of New York State town law, there's actually two sections of that town law, which we spelled out now, 274A and 274B of the town law. One dealing with special use permits, the other dealing with site plan approvals. So with that, that's a brief overview of what we've got. I've asked those in the audience and in the room here for their comments. Now I'll turn it open to the audience on Zoom and ask you to unmute, identify yourself, and let us know what's on your mind.
You were asking for them or for me?
I'm asking for those on Zoom. If they want to talk, to unmute and let us know what questions or concerns they might have. And once again, I'll ask if anybody has any questions. If I don't hear any, then I will come back to the members of the committee here in the room and say to them, what's your, oops, somebody come on.
Yeah, Ron, we're trying to listen. Jim and Nancy Falanga here, Jim Foley as well. We're trying to listen. It's been mumbled most of the evening, but you never did introduce the committee members, and if you did, I might have missed it. Can you tell us who the committee members are?
Sure, I'll go over it again. I did introduce those that were here in the room. We have our zoning inspector, John Weidenborner.
Yeah.
From the Conservation Board, we have Kim Boyd. From the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have Jody Phoenix. Online, we have Nate Bowerman from the Town Board. Other members of the committee that were excused tonight, Doug Beats, who is a member of the Planning Board, and he's working tonight and couldn't make it. And the other one is Hal Adams, and he's the chairperson of the Ag Advisory Committee, and he couldn't make it because of family obligations. The other one that's not with us tonight is our code officer, Dan Del Fiore, and Dan is excused here tonight as well. So is that okay, Jim? Did you hear all that?
Yeah, I didn't get the second one though, the second female.
Jody Bennings.
Okay, thanks.
She's a member of the Town Zoning Board of Appeals, resident here in the town.
All right, thank you. And Ron, will there be actually minutes from tonight's meeting, or is it just being recorded?
No, there'll be minutes posted on the town website.
Okay, and tell me again, when are we shooting for the public hearing? Do we have a date, or that's just a floating date at this time?
Well, it looks right now that we may have another meeting to review an amendment to this draft at our December 6th workshop. And then it would be submitted to the town board. Probably they wouldn't get it for the county planning board because they meet, I believe it's on the 8th of December. And it would not give them enough time to review it for that meeting. So they most likely would be receiving it for their January 12th meeting, which would put it, like the notes here.
Okay, and then can we submit questions after we read the minutes? Because we did miss quite a bit tonight. And want to know when would that be available and when would you need the questions submitted for the next meeting?
Well, we think we're going to have this posted on YouTube tomorrow. Is that correct, John?
That will be the attempt, yes.
And then we would want your comments back in time to at least look at them before the next meeting, so that we're not wasting the committee's time setting up here reacting. So to get us back to us by the 30th of November, that might be.
When is the next board meeting, the next committee meeting on?
The next committee meeting has been scheduled for Monday, December 6th
Monday. I had it wrong on my calendar.
at 6:30 here in the town hall.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, anything else, Jim? Nancy?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Anybody else on that? All right, well, not hearing any other comments online, I think that we need to consider some of Al's comments. We need to consider the comments that we received here tonight from the town engineer.
I have a couple more if you don't mind.
Yeah, I absolutely don't mind at all. That's why we appreciate your being here.
Well, I don't know that, that for consideration, but again, I went through it all, Ron, and I think first I want to say that the Farmington's local law, I do know in dealing with the number of communities is pretty strong. And every one that I review, I try to add something that I take from another community and bring it to the table. So I'm going through, and I'll try to go in order that I saw. And then mostly it's just dealing with clarification. You have criteria for the special use permit. That's a section, I think that's on page 8.
Right.
I'm considering that section A, we say, I'm not concerned, I said that wrong. A identifies that you want all parties of the O&M plan to be identified. My question for you guys is, should that also say, and submission of an O&M plan? Do we need this? I guess I believe that our special use permit criteria is an operation and maintenance plan has to be provided, a decommissioning plan has to be provided, a decommissioning estimate has to be provided. And we specify some of that, but I don't, as I go through A through F, I'm not pulling out that an O&M plan is required. We say all identified parties, maybe that's good enough, I don't know, but I'm wondering if that should specifically state an operation and maintenance plan and identification of all parties responsible be provided.
Good catch.
One thing that I'm seeing in other communities, and we, I believe, cover it with a letter of credit, but I don't know if we need to specify it elsewhere, is they call it a road maintenance agreement. So during construction, town roads are being actively used for construction. Most of the construction vehicle is minimized to the site, but some communities are requiring an agreement to be provided ahead of time or as part of the special use permit that says this road will be maintained and a dollar value be provided to the community for the construction purposes. Most of those communities also don't require a letter of credit during construction. So I don't know if that's something that we want to specify ahead of time or just capture as part of the letter of credit submission. That's up to you guys to look into, but it's just one item that I have seen other communities specifically reference.
Yeah, if you could give me an example of what another community has done,
Sure.
be glad to look at that.
I can provide you one. You cover mostly everything else that I had questioned because you have it all landscaping and stormwater mitigation. You have that all as part of the site plan requirements. It doesn't specifically state, Ron, in A through F that a site plan would be required. I do realize that it's an option because you're not necessarily saying all special use permits require a site plan. I don't know as if we want to have that specified or not.
Okay.
Because you capture like all the landscaping visual requirements, all the fencing requirements that you want, and I don't know if we need to tie the two together by specifying under special use. In order to get special use permit compliance, site plan has to be provided, or application, or
Yeah.
Whatever the term is.
16585.4 is criteria for accepting an application for site plan approval for a large-scale ground-mounted solar PV system. Maybe the word is required as part of the special use permit.
Maybe, I
Don't
don't,
we look at that?
it just, I think the two are hand in hand anyway. I think you have it covered. I just want to double check. You under H, you have cost estimate prepared by a licensed engineer, which is to be reviewed and accepted by the town engineer, estimating full cost of decommissioning and removal of the solar PV system. You specify later on all items of the site to be removed, which is what we require, right? We require all solar. Do we need to specify there that it's not just solar PV system, but it's all items associated with?
Ancillary.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to, but it might be an option to.
A overkill is not bad at all.
Yeah, we definitely capture it later on.
Yeah.
I think lastly, Ron, and this, John, this is kind of up your alley as well. All of our projects that come to the town have to meet fire code. We know that, we require that. It's written, that gives a lot of flexibility to the fire marshal and the code enforcement officer as to whether or not, how much of that code we want to adhere to, because these aren't considered structures like a building. What we are seeing a lot of communities and fire departments and emergency responders requiring is for us to maintain a width, a 20-foot width around the perimeter of the solar panel to the fence line. So I had highlighted under site plan where we have a security fence, but I think you probably have a better spot later on where we talk about access roads. I just didn't want to get the two confused.
Yeah, we also have setback requirements from the property line, minimums greater than 20 feet.
Yes, 100%. So I think one question is do we want to specifically specify fence line to solar panels have to be a minimum of 20 feet? Now, we also we don't want to promote usage of the farmland, and that's the whole purpose of to minimize that.
Right.
But we also, I'm wondering if we need to at least identify that we need to maintain the safety access of a certain distance from panel to fence line to adhere to that fire code. Not necessarily build a road, but just give us that width for equipment if necessary. Again, something to consider.
Yeah, we'll take that into consideration, John, and Augie, the fire marshal, will look through that.
The last one associated with that, Ron,
Yeah.
is they're also asking that gates be provided along the fence line at multiple areas in case something were to happen. It gives them ability to escape. Again, not a requirement, but something to consider that I've seen elsewhere.
You've seen that elsewhere?
Yeah.
And,
Orleans County has got an emergency and access management team that responds via the county, and they've provided a lot of that language to some of the communities that we work with over there. Again, they're requiring it, but not a lot of other communities are
is that for solar?
for solar farms. So they are requiring that 20-foot be met around the perimeter. They're requiring access at certain distances along the fence line.
So are you having like emergency man gates, or like similar to the gas station there, they have each side has that emergency crash gate for exit?
Yes, some form of access along the perimeter, which in itself could create a problem too, but I think it's just something to think about. And maybe it's a certain distance that, again, fire code allows you guys to dictate whatever you need, that it feels appropriate. Right now, we get an access road that meets the weight and truck requirements, that gets us to the site and to portions of the site. From that point on, we usually have access ways that are manageable. We don't really dictate beyond that. Some communities, some teams are requiring a little bit more.
There might be, I know there's NFPA changes coming up for those type of stations. Like I know National Fuel put them in their area to kind of preempt those changes. So there's things that we can look in and see what changes are coming.
Yeah, I don't know that you need to have these gates everywhere, but it's just didn't want you to not, that's what I'm seeing some places.
Yeah, so if you could provide that language from Orleans County,
Yeah, I'll send some reports to you that I have.
be glad to look at that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience in the room?
Just to clarify Hal's comment on the state code. So the ICC, New York State adopts their own version of ICC. They don't actually adopt the ICC like a lot of states do. So as far as following the international code, the recommendation would probably be to just follow the state codes because that's the state version of the international code. It has all the changes that Department of State has and so forth.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? With that, it's 7:27. And I think we can shut down the meeting and go home and relax. I'm in favor of that. Thank you, everybody, for your input. It's been very helpful. Look forward to seeing most of you on the 6th of December.